Why are we seeing more northern lights this year? This is on The Conversation by Sandra Chapman, Director, Center for Fusion, Space and Astrophysics, University of Warwick in the UK. Solar Cycle 25 is kicking off in style. Our sun has a cycle of activity and is becoming more active. There will be more sightings of northern lights and southern lights, and that is what is happening this winter. As well as emitting sunlight, our sun has an expanding atmosphere made of charged particles and magnetic fields. This high-speed solar wind blows over the Earth, and as we know, we have direct solar wind coming in at us from CME from the sun yesterday and today as well, according to space weather. Now, this high-speed solar wind blows over our Earth, but the Earth has its own magnetic field. Imagine a large bar magnet with its poles roughly aligned with geographic north and south, and this can deflect the solar wind. This magnetic barrier is weakest at the poles of the bar magnet, so that we tend to see auroral displays at high altitudes and latitudes. Now, the bigger the space weather storm, the deeper charged particles can penetrate the magnetic field of our Earth, so that during intense events, the northern lights are seen at lower latitudes. Now, in 2022, we've seen some spectacular auroral displays already. Natural light displays in the sky in more places than is usual across the UK and or the border of Canada and the US as well. The UK Met Office is tracking coronal mass ejections, a sudden release of the energetic charged particles and magnetic field that left the sun recently, January 29, arrived at Earth overnight on February 1st, and we're still getting them today. So we may see some nice auroral displays in northern Scotland early February. Now, northern lights are also being spotted in northern England this winter, which is a telltale sign of increasing solar activity. But why is this happening now? Solar flares erupt from the surface of the sun, and these expand outwards as coronal mass ejections that carry energy in both their charged particles and magnetic fields. If a coronal mass ejection collides with the Earth, it interacts with the Earth's magnetic field, driving a geomagnetic storm. I support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. The Earth has a roughly dipolar magnetic field with the tail stretching out by the solar wind, stretched out, and with the poles near to the geographic north and south poles. And it's at these high latitudes that the charged particles can travel to reach the Earth's atmosphere more easily. Charged particles strike the upper atmosphere, the ionosphere, causing it to glow, creating a beautiful display, the aurora borealis or northern lights. These are not just beautiful displays, these are extreme space weather events and can affect a wide range of systems from power supplies, power grids, aviation, satellites, and radio communication. Space weather, these can induce unwanted currents in any electric power grid, causing damage in extreme cases, power cuts. This is what happened in Russia as well with this solar storm that came in. The ionosphere is also disturbed, affecting communications, and further out in space, where the charged particle environment becomes more energized and can damage satellites. The sun has a cycle of activity. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections are frequent, while in quiet years they rarely occur. The solar cycles are on average about 11 years long, but actually vary both in duration and in the level of activity. It's possible to track the level of solar activity by counting sunspots, dark patches on the surface of the sun, which correlate with likely occurrence of solar flares. The last few years have been a period of low activity and solar minimum. The minimum in the number of sunspots was observed at the end of 2019. We are now the rising phase of this new solar cycle of activity as the number of sunspots seen each day is steadily increasing. We can also see increased solar flare activity. There are three categories of solar flares measuring by their X-ray emissions. X-class flares are big. They are major events that can trigger continental scale radio blackouts and citywide power outages. M-class flares are medium-sized. They can cause brief radio blackouts that affect Earth's polar regions. C-class flares are small with few noticeable consequences here on Earth. On October 9, an M-class solar flare erupted, sending a coronal mass ejection that hit our Earth on October 12th. It usually takes about 3 days to get to Earth, and it triggered a moderate geomagnetic storm. On November 3rd and 4th, we saw the most intense geomagnetic storm to hit Earth since September 2017. Since each solar cycle is unique both in duration and activity level, it's difficult to predict how active the next phase of the new solar cycle will be. Recently, research mapped this irregular cycle in time onto a uniform solar cycle clock, showing the graphic. Now we can also read back from the sun clock to see where or when we are in the solar cycle, so as well as helping tourists to plan their Nordic holidays to see the northern lights. This graphic could also help power grid operators who need to schedule critical maintenance during periods of quiet space weather. And here we are in space weather. These are our sunspots. Sunspot AR 2936 over here is crackling with C-class solar flares. This goes to see with solar, and also all the others are quiet. But let's see, the C-class solar flares is what we're getting now. The expulsion on the sun happens when energy stored twisting magnetic fields, usually above the sunspot, is suddenly released, and flares produce a burst of radiation across electromagnetic spectrum. C-class flares are the small with few noticeable consequences on Earth, so this is what we'll be getting now. Okay, and let's go back. This is what is coming in. Weekend Aurora Watch now. The minor G1 class geomagnetic storms, which began February 4th, could continue to today, February 5th, as Earth enters a stream of high-speed solar wind. The gaseous material is flowing from an equatorial hole in the sun's atmosphere. There we go. Isn't that beautiful? This is February 2nd, 2022. The solar wind coming out of this from the equatorial hole right there. And some views of the beautiful auroras right here. Lights over Lapland. Not only did we see some of the most impressive auroras in recent memory, but also we had the pleasure of watching a happy couple get engaged under the lights. Isn't that beautiful? He's down on bended knee proposing. Oh, I wish them the best of luck for all their beautiful married lives. Now here, the dreamy sunset. Okay, at the bottom we can see the sunsets. Okay, group AR 2936. Wow. These are the sunspots. How did they get them so? Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so that's it. We still have a lot of, basically every week, but they seem to be increasing the past few days. So all of you around the Canada-US border, upstate New York, Ohio, Montana, you may be able to see, if you have clear skies, beautiful aurora borealis, northern lights. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support.